AI reshapes the business world, authentic human communication has become the ultimate competitive advantage. And if you are not using storytelling to your advantage, you're missing out. And in this podcast, we're going to talk about how to use this thing you're already doing.
Passion, inspiration, determination. Are you ready to jump into a better life? Welcome to our program, Jump Into It. Prosper with purpose. Welcome to Jump Into It, where we spotlight women who are turning vision into momentum and truly prospering with purpose. Today, we are so excited to welcome Joanne O'Sullivan. Joanne is a storyteller, screenwriter, comedian, podcast producer, and executive coach who has spent her career either telling stories or helping others tell theirs. She has written for This Hour Has 22 Minutes and Baroness Von Sketch Show, produced the award-winning podcast Excel, and coached more than 800 people in storytelling, presentations, and communications. What I loved about Joanne's work is that she helps people move beyond polished scripts and into stories that feel real, memorable, and deeply human. Joanne, welcome to Jump Into It.
Thank you so much. And what a lovely introduction. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's very nice to be here. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, we're so happy to have you too. I mean, you have such a colorful past, very interesting, a real deviation from some of the other guests that we had. And so I want to delve a little bit more into your career from comedian, screenwriter, podcasting, coaching, and storytelling. Can you take us back to how this path began for you?
Yeah, so I went through university for theater, probably much to my parents' chagrin. But when I graduated, I kind of naturally jumped into comedy, and that intersection actually started with improvising. So I was an improviser and gradually became a stand-up comic. And I think at that point, we're talking many years ago, the hope was always, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but often the hope was to segue into television writing of some kind, either being the star of your own sitcom, which I think was the ultimate goal for most comedians, but comedy writing in television. So I eventually made that leap, and at around the same time, I actually got hired by a company that was looking for actors to play customers for a very large Canadian bank and to be customers that they needed to sell something to or customers that were angry. And we had a checklist and we would coach them on how they could have done better or how things that they could have said that would have moved the conversation in a different way. And so I started television writing and doing this other job sort of simultaneously. And then my career went into two different directions. So I'll go back to the comedy for a moment. I was always a long form comedian. So I always told stories from my life. I wasn't necessarily set up punchline, set up punchline. I told long stories about my life, often that were embarrassing. And then that became solo shows. So I wrote and toured a bunch of solo shows. So I became really invested in story and how to tell a good story and what storytelling was. On the other side of my career, for that company I got hired for, I eventually started coaching for them and hiring for them, writing their courses for them. And that side of my career took off at the same time. Fast forward so many years, and I started taking what I was learning from the training side and combining it with what I'd learned from the storytelling side and offering my own programs to teach people how to tell stories and and then in business, how to use stories to inspire and to gain buy-in, et cetera, et cetera. So that's sort of the short form. Over the pandemic, television writing became
Wow.
podcasting as it did for many of
Yeah,
us.
yeah, right,
And
right.
I
Yeah,
and
no,
now
and
I
it's
do
a, yeah.
brand yeah, and now I do branded podcasting. I produce it. And that's also storytelling. It's taking a company and a brand and teaching them how to tell their story in a way that entertains and makes people appreciate the content that they're putting out.
Wow. And it's interesting. You started from humor
Mhm.
and then you expanded that talent, that ability to communicate through training, through writing, the cross section of being able to have that raw talent of being able to communicate a story and how that transforms in so many different mediums, so many different channels.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about it, all stories everywhere. So story
Oh,
is everywhere. Story is in
right.
every job, in
Yeah, right.
every relationship, every memory. And so it's really just knowing that it's there and then learning how to use them. So it's not hard to do it across channels because they just exist naturally anyway.
Yeah. So how do you tell a great story? I mean, as an entrepreneur, which our listeners are more or less entrepreneurs, how do you encourage them to tell a real story that doesn't sound rehearsed, doesn't sound salesy, that can be really engaging and authentic?
So that's a very big question that I could teach in a day, but I will say
Yeah.
high
All right.
level. For a story to be a story, change has to happen. So for a story not to be, let's say, an anecdote or just a funny thing that happened on my way to work, you have to change. And with all types of change, there is usually some kind of pressure or pain or a problem, and that's the stakes. So I would say if I were to say, teach somebody how to tell a great story in their founder story, let's say, and I had 10 minutes to try to get them to do that, I would tell them what was your goal? What were your obstacles to getting that goal? And what were the real stakes if you didn't achieve it? And once you have figured out what your stakes are, raise them, take those stakes to the like really spend some time thinking about what were the actual stakes. Were the stakes for me? Were they for my family? Were they for my finances? Were they for my clients? Like, what were the stakes, and make them as high as possible. Make it really clear to your audience so they care, right? That's how you
Mm,
make people
mm,
care is, and sometimes people
interesting.
forget about the stakes and
Yeah.
forget to articulate the stakes, which I think is one of the most important things. So I would say, give us the before, what's happening in your life as you're going along your life. Give us the thing that
Yeah.
happens that makes you want to make a decision to maybe start your entrepreneurial life. What are the stakes? Really articulate them, raise them.
Okay.
What do you
Okay.
do to get
Yeah.
there? And then what's the resolution? And then what's the lesson? Like if you want to teach somebody something from your own founder story. And in terms of making it natural, just have it be true. Like I teach true storytelling, right? So just
Yeah.
keep it as true as possible and invite the audience into the emotion of what happened.
All right. I hope I don't put you on the spot, but can you do that now? Tell that your story that demonstrates all of those elements that make a great story.
Hmm.
Is it
I mean, a lot of my stories are more than 2 minutes long, but let me see.
3, 4 time? We have time, but
Yeah, yeah,
like,
I can do that. I can do that.
yeah?
So this is kind of the story of my artistic life. Okay. So the before, and I'm going to name the things that I'm doing as I'm doing them.
Sure. Okay. Awesome.
So in grade 9, I was getting bullied. And part of the reason why I was getting bullied was because the most popular girl in school had a crush on my brother and he didn't like her back. And so that meant that a lot of people got mad at me for some reason because you can't attack the cute guy, you attack the sister. So I was getting bullied. I was grade 9. It was a small town and it was kind of scary. And I was unhappy. And I wasn't sure how to get out of this unhappy situation. And then one day I was walking down the hall and I saw an advertisement for an art school. I had no thoughts about going to an art school or being an actor or anything like that, but it would send you to a different school if you got in. And I really wanted out of the school that I was in. So I decided to try out. And I had to have a monologue, and I knew nothing about acting, the stakes. But if I didn't get in, I was going to be
Uh,
trapped in this small town with a lot of
yeah.
people who, at that moment in time, I felt when you are a teenager, everything is so heightened. But I was so sad and it was very hard. And for me, it felt like the end of the world if I didn't get out of that environment. And so I got a monologue and I rehearsed it. And I got my parents to drive me to this audition. When I was trying out, I was so nervous. I was incredibly shy. I never public spoke. I was incredibly shy. I barely spoke up at all. And as I was saying my monologue, I forgot it and
Oh,
I
okay.
stopped and because I it felt like such an important thing for me. I forgot it and I stopped and then I just decided I was like, what? This is for me. This is for a change. I tried again, started it again, and I managed to say it. And I ended up getting into that school. And that school changed my life. Like I met all these people. I learned. I see. Even though I've ended up going for theater, and I went to university for theater, I always knew I didn't think I was ever going to be. I was a writer, but meeting people who were artistic and getting exposure to all of these things just changed who I was. And that is my founder story in a way, because that kickstarted me into everything that I do now. And I will say now, so that is the end. That is the change in me, is that I
Yeah.
became an
Yeah.
artist through this fluke that I can't believe happened. And I will say now, looking back, I'm telling that story from the teenage perspective. And that's the other important thing of storytelling. You
Mhm.
have to
Okay.
tell it from the perspective of the person that
Yeah.
you are, right? I
Yes.
feel like the world looking back, we were teenagers and nobody was actually being that horrible or cruel, and life
Right. It
probably would have
wasn't
gone
life
on.
threatening as you
Yeah,
think,
I mean, these are
right?
people I'm
Yeah.
friends with now, and
Yeah.
but it felt like life or death in that moment. And so
Yeah.
that's an example. And an
Yeah.
example of the raising the stakes is me saying something along the lines of, I felt like it was life or death in that
Yes.
moment,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you make people recognize that. So my goal in telling it like that is there's going to be people in that audience who are either bullied or we're all teenagers, had some kind of exposure to feeling scared as a teenager. So the goal is to make them recognize so they invest in your story. And I've never told that story before, just as
Oh,
an
well,
aside.
like, great job. You did, and it's interesting because a lot of the women that I interview, they talk about what was the crossroads for them to start a different career path, and it was pain. And it's usually the
It's often
pain
pain.
that right? It unfortunately, it's not the inspiration. Yeah, yeah, I'm, like, inspired, but it comes from pain, and then that pain is how they've learned and overcome it, and now it's a teaching moment for other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's yeah. So thank you for that. That was awesome. Another question I have is, what are some of the biggest mistakes people make when they're trying to present themselves, pitch an idea, or share their expertise?
Well, I would say not using story is one of the biggest. Like, we tend to get tied up in facts and figures. And the biggest challenge right now in this world of AI is attention. It's impossible to keep people's attention. So you have to
Mhm.
figure out a way to engage your audience and get their attention right off the hook, or
Yeah.
right at the beginning, by using something like a hook. So I would say, if you're just pitching and you're just saying facts, like, if you take this thing that I'm pitching, this is the benefit, this is the benefit, this is the benefit. That might sound okay. Maybe there's a chance that you're going to hook somebody on that
Mhm,
benefit.
mhm,
But if you
mhm.
tell the story of yourself finding out why this is such a great thing and how it actually changed your life and the good that actually came from it, and you make somebody actually feel something, this is the thing. Making people feel something is the way to get buy in, to change their mind, to get them
Mhm.
invested in what you're saying. So I do think we tend to hang our hats on facts and figures, which there's absolutely a place for. I'm not saying there isn't a place for
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But often in presentations, or if you're pitching or you're trying to get somebody to buy in, you're really leaving money on the table if you're not using a story truly. And we tell stories all the time. All you have to do is learn how to use yours in a slightly different way to achieve your goals. Most of us already know how to do it, just need
Mhm.
some tweaks to make it something more useful for yourself.
Well, they say that when we make decisions, we make them first emotionally, and then we use the numbers to kick in the rationale, that other side of the brain to say why it works. But if you don't have, so when you say about the hook, we get driven in by the emotional hook. There's a lot of hooks out there that once you get hooked in, you go, has nothing to do with what the essence was. And I think that disconnect breaks up the
Yeah.
credibility of your story, or when if you're setting certain expectations and then you're not delivering against it. So your hook's not matching the real story behind that.
It's interesting, and I'm gonna try to say this in a way that makes sense because I think it's one of the most important things about storytelling when it comes to wanting to change people's minds or getting
Yeah.
buy-in or getting them to agree with you. And that
Mhm.
is every memory we have is saved as a story in our head. We all have, I'm going to date myself here, a file of facts. Hopefully, all of your listeners know what a file of facts is. But we have a file of facts of stories in our head of every single thing we've done, every memory. We don't remember a
Yeah.
second. Well, we might, but most of it is stories from our lives. And if you were to ask me to do something, I will go through this file of facts of memories of mine and pro and con, and based on my previous knowledge, make a decision of whether or not I'm going to do it. So if you're just like, go do this thing, I will flip open my file of facts and use all of my previous stories to help me make that decision. If instead of just saying, go do this thing, you tell me a story of you doing it, and you tell me about how it was challenging for you and how you overcame it and how it had some kind of positive outcome, there's actually a chemical thing happening that's called neural coupling. And neural coupling
Okay.
means I will put your story into my file of facts. And I
Oh,
can't help that from happening. So that's what
oh,
stories
okay.
do. That's how we get to know people. That's how we choose who
Yeah.
we like, who we love. We put their stories in our file of facts. So now, when you tell me to do something, your story of you doing it successfully is part of my decision making process. It just slides
Hmm.
right in there, and I can't help it. That's
Interesting.
yes. So
Interesting.
this is
Yeah.
why divide and conquer is so successful and siloing. Because if you get people to stop telling each other their stories, you get them to stop caring about each other, you get them to stop
Right.
knowing the different techniques of how they can come together to help each other. It's why a lot of what's happening in this world right now is so successful because dividing and stopping people from communicating and opening our file of faxes to each other has some pretty bad consequences.
Now, with fake news, you are creating fake stories and not real story.
Yeah. Putting a story in your file of facts doesn't necessarily mean it takes away your critical thinking skills. So it
Okay.
doesn't mean that you still have all of your other stories to look at what you're being told and decide if you believe it or not. However, if you're in one of those fake news silos, like how our algorithms give us all the same information all the time, if you are
Right.
in one of those fake news silos,
Yeah.
then you will lose the side of the critical thinking that makes you go, but what about this? I wonder, right? And that's why you see people starting to believe some pretty crazy things. Yeah.
Because there's repetition, right? The power of repetition, saying it over and over again. Or when you relax, like previous, well, she's a hypnotherapist. So when your mind goes into a different analysis state, highly suggestive state, then that story, I guess, gets embedded into your brain with less filters.
Repetition. I mean, you just see it. It's happening all over the place now, and people aren't having exposure to other points of view. Having exposure to other points of view is what woke used to mean.
Yeah.
Just having exposure to other people's lives. And now it's like a dirty word, but all it really means is understanding the context of somebody's life situation so you understand some of the decisions they've either made or had to make. Not
Mhm.
such a dirty word, but it's been very powerfully used to silo and yeah, getting us into these echo chambers of repetition that make things
It's really
lose some critical.
powerful. That's really powerful because you're going to the essence of how we connect with one another and
Mhm.
how we build those relationships.
Yeah.
and the power of the story that does it.
It's why I teach story, to be honest with you. Like, it's that kind of, like, you asked about authenticity. I love bringing that into the
Yeah,
business world. I
yeah,
love teaching
yeah.
about how it makes work situations and work relationships less toxic. I love talking about how it makes us like each other and understand each other. And even if somebody you work with is not going to be your best friend forever or ever at all, which is often the case,
Mhm,
still
mhm.
using story can find one bit of connection just to make everything a little bit, like, if you hate somebody, or let's not use that word. If you are in opposition to somebody, let's say
Okay,
politically or whatever, but you
okay.
find out they have the same dog you do, you're gonna like them a little bit more. You can't help it, right? So I love that part of storytelling. In my solo shows, I like my solo shows are true stories about my life. And I tell those not because I think I'm particularly interesting, but I tell them because I know it builds community and I
Mhm,
know it helps
mhm.
people feel less alone. At least these are the messages that I get. It certainly helps me feel less alone. And I just love that about storytelling, genuinely.
Well, the audience may not know this, but I met you through Tales Toronto, which is a community group where story writers or storytellers step up and they tell their story. And there's maybe 5 or 6 storytellers for that evening. And it's interesting when I leave, I feel elevated. I feel this surge of energy and it's unexplainable. It's almost like I was saying to a friend, it's like having gone to a concert or an amazing play. Like there's something about that connection there and listening to some of these stories that we're all connecting to at the same time. This authentic play of emotions, and it's an element of performance for sure. And it's live, and there's something that is just it's amazing about it. It's magical, and it's hard to define.
Yeah, I agree. And it is hard to define, but it is as old as time. Like, we have been
Yeah.
gathering to tell stories from the very beginning. And I just think when we're in those rooms and that's happening, it hooks into something in us that we recognize and that we love and that frankly we need. Humans need
Yeah,
storytelling. And yeah, so I agree. And you're right, it is hard to define. It's just sort of it's bigger than that.
it is. It is. Okay, so I have a few other questions. So what role does humor play in connection, especially in business or leadership settings where people sometimes feel they need to be polished and serious? So I know we talked about don't always just say facts. Sometimes when you talked about storytelling in business, what came to mind was case study. Or I tell you, I had this problem. This is how you solved it. Here are the facts around it. But we never get into how I emotionally felt. Well, sometimes we do, but if it's a business to business, less of that emotional play on it. What are your thoughts?
When I am teaching a workshop on storytelling in business, I started as a stand-up comic. So some people worry that, oh no, is it going to have to be like I don't think you have to challenge yourself to write jokes, but I do think moments of levity are important. And in terms of what part does it play in business, it is a form of community building. And I will tell you why. So the easiest route to comedy for somebody who's not a comedian is recognition. So the
Okay.
way when I do my storytelling, I can tell, let's say I have an audience of 60, and let's say I'm telling a story. I have a funny story about my dad, let's say. I can, and but sort of my dad is your quintessential blue collar tough guy. So I can tell people who had that dad, I hear them laughing when I get into the recognition. People who grew up in a small town, I can hear them laughing. So I can feel waves of people connecting with me because they're recognizing what I say. If I am talking to a group of parents and I say teenagers, they all laugh. So it's really
Right.
easy and useful to teach people in business that, especially if you are talking to a company full of people that you work with, there are so many in jokes or words that they
Yeah.
will find funny just by you saying them. And I challenge them. I have this part of the workshop where I'm like, we go into groups of 5 and try to come up with one word or one sentence that you think will make everybody else in this room laugh. And they do it. And it's just easy and everybody laughs and they're reminded about what's similar about themselves and it's fun. And so I think that humor, especially in a tense, if there's a big change happening in a company and people are feeling nervous
Mm-hmm.
and scared, identifying that nerves and scared and talking about something that people would recognize about maybe why and getting that laugh just really lowers the stress. It releases those happy hormones and makes people feel more comfortable listening to you. And I think it has a really, really important place in business. That said, I would never say to somebody, you have to be funny every time, but recognition is the quickest and easiest and quite a fun route to building that community. Like companies will often hire a comedian for their Christmas party, let's say.
Yes,
And the
right,
comedian
right.
has to do
Yeah.
a lot of homework on the company. What will
Mm,
they recognize? And that's all they're digging
okay.
for.
Okay. Yeah.
What will they recognize? Not like, what's the great punchline for this joke? It's like, what will they recognize?
Oh, yeah.
And it's
Okay.
definitely
Okay.
a great way to build community.
What comes to mind when you say this, it's not so much a business to business thing, but you go to a concert and then they will say, "Welcome to I'm so glad Toronto," or they'll put the city in the name of the in the song, and then everybody goes
Goes
crazy.
crazy.
Yeah,
Crazy. And it
yeah,
doesn't even have to be like, so knowing your audience, this is where, so part of what I teach
yeah,
is like, you really have to know your audience, right? So sometimes it can be things that they recognize within their work, but if they're all, it can be things they recognize in their city. It can be things that they recognize just because maybe they're all at the same age, like if I'm doing a high school or whatever. So there's all sorts of different places that you can pluck recognition out of. And it's just a simple, fun way to just put a little bit of energy. And it feels good having people laugh when you're talking. It
yeah,
also gives you some
absolutely. Yeah,
energy.
yeah, yeah. Or they do sports, right? Like the sports, and our team did da,
Yes.
da, 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 but we're yeah, right. And it's
Yeah.
totally unrelated to the topic, but like you said, it pulls everybody in, and now they've
Yeah.
got that common connection, and then they move on. Yeah,
I'm a Leafs fan,
good.
which is very painful. And so if I'm ever doing any talk in Toronto, I got
Yeah,
50% are going to be Leafs fans. I know that. That's always true. So I can usually
yeah,
slide in something about that. And then, and, and truly, it chemically, technically, it makes people like you more. It just does. Like when you have these points
mhm,
of reference that
mhm.
they recognize in you. And if you are a leader, that is such a great, quick, easy way just to build your presence, build your executive presence, and have people trust you.
Yeah. It's brilliant. It's simple, but it's brilliant. It works.
Yeah.
And it's and the, yeah, they don't talk to someone like you. It may not come to mind, but once you hear it going, oh, that makes so much
Yeah.
sense, right? It's
Yeah.
like some of the things in life. Yeah. I have another question. So
Mhm.
you worked as a podcast producer as well. What makes a podcast conversation memorable? The questions, the guests, the vulnerability, or something else?
I would say all of those things, to be honest. I mean, let's start with I work in branded often. So these are conversations that are representing a company. And so I would say the first stop is it entertaining? Like, or is it educational or entertaining? It can't be a commercial, is what I'm saying. So that's the first thing. You just got to take that off the table. It can't be a commercial for the company. So you really have to invest the time to figure out who their audience is and what do they want and what do they like to hear about and is it entertaining? So I would say, and by entertaining, I don't mean like fun and funny all the time, but I mean something that I'm going
Yeah.
to invest in and really want to listen to and that I'm learning from. So then I think a great host is absolutely vital in doing interviews. It's not as easy as people think, right? It's not easy being able to really listen to the person. Like that's the hardest part. Like you have to be a great listener. So you have to really listen to the person so you can ask follow-up questions while thinking about the next question that you have that you want to tell, while just
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
authentic and casual and getting a connection. I think we're doing it pretty well right now.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
host absolutely is so important because you don't want the listener to feel scared on the host's behalf. You don't want them to feel worried that they're tripping up or that they're nervous or that. So you want them to feel confident. Then absolutely getting, I mean, it's all of it. Like I'm going through, it's all of it. But let me try to do a bigger lens. So I'm a producer. So it's my job to make sure that the topic appeals to the audience. So I'm going to start with me, actually. I think I'm the most important person in the process. But
Today you are. Today you are.
but you have to make sure you really have to give some thought, especially when you're doing this for a brand, because you're satisfying a client. So you really have to do some needs analysis and what does their audience want? And then you have to make good on it. So that includes finding a really good host and a really good guest. But then in every single episode, we're going to go back to storytelling. What are the stakes? You need to find something that emotionally connects people right off the top so they care and so they listen. Like right out of the gate, what are the stakes in this interview? How do I make people feel nervous that they don't know this thing? And so they're going to listen to the very end,
Mhm.
right? Or
Mhm.
what are the
Yeah.
stakes
Yeah.
in the person? And
Yeah.
how do I make the audience worry about that person so they listen to the end? Or so that's it still has to be a pretty good story, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
combination of a great guest, a good host, but also really good producing, somebody who's going to do the homework to make sure that they're putting all those components together in a really good way. I also work with some amazing sound designers. So like, we're not even going to get into sound design, but for the documentary type podcast, great sound design also goes a really, really long way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're hoping we're going to have another podcast to talk more in depth about this because this is a really, there's so many layers to it. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that listen to podcasts and produce them. So I think it's going to be pretty compelling.
Yeah.
And
And what every single one of us would have a different answer to that question. And I feel like
yeah.
my answer
Yeah.
was everything, but it's kind of true in a way.
Well, it reminds me too when you watch some movies or mysteries, the first scene is going to be maybe the person over the body or so. And then it cuts into the beginning of the story. So you're holding on to watching the whole story to get back to the first scene to pull all the pieces together, what really happened to them.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to do something right off the top that makes people care.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right.
And so,
Right.
whatever that is in terms of what your podcast is about, that's the
Yeah.
most important thing because right now, in all entertainment, is keeping people's attention. And if you are listening to a story or reading a book or watching a film and you don't care, it's because somehow you're either the wrong audience for it or they have not done a good enough job in articulating the stakes and why you should care,
Mhm.
in my humble opinion.
That's interesting. I always get nervous about listening to my own podcast. So it was, I guess, just recently I started listening to all my podcasts and sequence. Like, this is interesting. Like, good. So it's for me, by me, to me, right?
Yeah.
And then it gave me the confidence to share it with all my friends in a way that, hey, listen, if I find it interesting and you're my friend and you're my buddy and you're going through a similar journey, then I think you're going to find this interesting too.
Yeah.
But it had to come from a point of me authentically listening to it as a listener, I mean, with that mindset, because I needed that time to get away from being so critical about it,
Yeah.
to just
If
purely enjoy.
if I were to give you, so if I were to give you, I don't know how you're going to start this podcast. Maybe it'll be just from the welcoming me in. But so if I were to give one tip, because you said
Yeah.
you wanted to talk about it anyway. So for if I
Yeah.
was producing this podcast, I would probably start it with a little beginning point where I would say something like, as AI reshapes the business world, authentic human communication has become the ultimate competitive advantage. And if you are not using storytelling to your advantage, you're missing out. And in this podcast, we're going to talk about Joanne O'Sullivan, who's going to tell you how to use this thing you're already doing and making sure that you, blah, blah, whatever that. So you say that thing that makes
Oh,
people
I
go,
already got it. Now I'm going to cut it and I'm going to put it in front.
do that. And that'd be good.
Before, right?
And then I'll tell you something. So
Yeah.
then if
Yeah.
you put yourself saying that at the top and then leave this part in when I'm telling you to say it, they will recognize it and laugh. So you're gonna get some humor out of it as well. So they'll go, "Oh, in comedy, we call that a callback." So they'll call back and
I
laugh
love
at that.
it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. All right. Another question for women entrepreneurs and professionals who want to be more visible, what is one story they should learn how to tell better?
Their founder story, I think, because I've learned so for an entrepreneur like me, this is something that it's interesting, like, as I say that out loud, because you got me to tell that story earlier, and it's probably something that
Yeah.
I actually need to work on. It's something that I train people. Sometimes you train things and you don't necessarily do it that well yourself. But I actually do have a story called Fair Queen that I do that with. Anyway, so their founder story, because I'm going to say, at least in the type of entrepreneur that I am, networking is so important. And
Mm.
I'm learning, and I'm really learning, and this is my own learning curve, is part of that is being able to tell a really great story of why you do what you do. And I think when you are passionate about whatever you are an entrepreneur about, people will see that passion and they want a part of it. So I think really spending some time thinking what brought you to the company that you have created and getting a really good story around that with really high stakes, and then coming out the other side, having created it and now working on it. People want to know they're working with people who are passionate about what they're doing.
It's true.
And I just think that is the most important story. I'm going to say a secondary story. Like, I think you should actually have a stable of stories, to be honest with you. So I think a secondary story is a client success story. So a story where you worked with somebody and you really helped them, whatever your business is. Like, I would tell recently helped somebody with a keynote that I'm really proud of. And it was a hard one and it went really well. And I'll probably, with that person's permission, eventually put that into my stable of stories. So, yeah, founder story, client success story. And then within the founder story or separately, a challenge, overcoming a challenge story. Just what was the hardest and what did you learn? Because I'm going to say this for all leaders, not even entrepreneurs. If you're willing to tell stories about failure, but then growing from that failure, that is
Yeah.
the best way to build trust. People who present themselves as all been great and I'm really good at it all, that's where the authenticity falls away. But if you are
Yeah.
willing to talk about failure and it remained a failure and you learned from it, or you managed to pull yourself out and it turned into a success, those are amazing stories for building trust. And so I think entrepreneurs, that's what it all is. It's like, who trusts you? We're all doing all the things. The storytelling market is there's a lot of people in my lane. I'm sure there's a lot of people in everybody's lane that whatever business they're trying to start, people stay with who they trust. That is the way to keep your clients. And that is with good storytelling.
Yeah. I think there's an evolution of how businesses are showing up today. I came from corporate before starting my own business, and it used to be we stand behind logos, the mission, vision, values. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Mhm.
You know, the vision is it's a little bit of a storytelling, but it's coming from very corporate speak, where people are seeking now for more of a personal story, even for big businesses to tell, where
Yeah,
it's yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
So
There's
it's
huge.
right, and the
Yeah.
founders and the I don't have the stats off the top of my head, but to have a faith to the business or the founder to be able to speak, it increases the credibility, the trust factor exponentially, as opposed to here's a logo, here's our mission, vision, and values, and
I don't have the exact number, to be honest with you. I don't have the exact percentage. LinkedIn does the skills, like they tell you what job skills are really high up and what people are asking for. And I think it's in the 60s right now. Communication skills. because all of the
Mm.
technical skills are being taken over by AI. So being able just to communicate properly, whether that be
Mm.
storytelling, whether that be knowing how to coach or mentor or have a difficult conversation or whatever that is outpacing so many of those technical skills now that you might identify with being a leader. It's so important. I absolutely agree. Yeah,
To your point, I is replacing lawyers, like all these professions, even diagnostics around your health. But the ability to have that one-to-one connection, that is not something you can replace with AI. So if you're an amazing salesperson and you need to work within a room or a community or networking, you're not going to be replaced by AI.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the other big benefit, getting into the
Yeah, that's
lanes where
you're going to be around for a while there,
yeah,
Joanne.
I'm gonna be around for a while, thank God.
Awesome, awesome. So one of the things that as we wrap up, and I love this conversation, so thank you so much for being a guest, is that we always ask our guests is you spent your career helping people, stories, and communicate with more impact. What does prosper with purpose mean for you?
Prosper with purpose, so it kinda goes back to what I said. I am pursuing this type of work, the business that I'm creating around giving these workshops and teaching people how to do keynotes, because I just believe that it is a really important human skill that we are losing. And I think we're living in a world right now where a lot of people are so quick to be angry at each other and don't understand other people's points of view. And that's really affecting a lot of our joy and our mental health. And I truly, truly believe that storytelling and connection and just good human communication is one of the best ways out of that toxicity. And so I was very mindful when I decided what type of thing I wanted to really pursue. And so I'm hoping I prosper in this business. And then my purpose is I want people to get along. I just, I think, I really think we could just like each other more and everybody we should all just be allowed to live, right? Like we should
Yeah,
all just be
yeah.
allowed to live in peace. And whether that's a peace that you bring into your organization or a peace that you bring into your family or the world, whatever, I truly believe that sharing our stories and being open to other point of views is a way to do that. It's something I really believe in. It means a lot to me. And that's what prosper with purpose. It means trying to, also want to be able to pay my bills and all of that. So doing
Absolutely, right. Yeah.
something
Abundance is important in all
in
aspects of
abundance.
life,
So
right?
trying to find prosperity through something that also makes me feel like I'm contributing something to the greater well being. That's what that means to me.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Thank you, Joanne. And if someone wants to learn about yourself, about storytelling, how could they reach out to you?
So my website is joanneosullivan.ca and the list of all of my workshops there. I'm also doing my fifth solo show in Stratford at the end of July. And
Okay.
that'll be on my website as well, but it's called Fair Queen. And that's actually mostly my founder story. The other one with me being a teenager, I've never told before, but I'm going to completely expand on that one. But this is a different story about me trying out to be the Bolton Fall Fair Queen at my father's request and failing once and then succeeding eventually. But it's how I learned storytelling because I changed the way that I tried out. Anyway, it's called Fair Queen. It's my
Awesome.
homage to small town living and people who grew up that way. But my
Well,
website,
I grew up in Thunder Bay, so
joanneosullivan.ca.
I came from a small town too. I don't know if that. So yeah, there is a
Uh,
certain connection that you have with people, and when you come from a small town, that it carries with you in a bigger city too. Well, I'm going to see if I can try to make it to Stratford to
July
watch your show.
30th.
It sounds
Yes,
amazing.
it's called Spring Fest, the festival. That's the website anyway. It's puppeteering and arts, and it's a beautiful, fun spring festival.
Fabulous. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you. So we'll have to have you come back again to talk more about podcasts and the power of the
Absolutely.
communication within podcasts and executing them. Thank you again. And our next show will have another fabulous guest whose journey is sure to inspire you. You can listen to our Jump Into It podcast on your favorite platform. We are on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, to name a few. With the courage and clarity to bring your ideas to life, be ready to jump into it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. Jump Into It. We empower business owners, marketers, and entrepreneurs to turn vision into momentum. Ready to supercharge your marketing? Grab the Jump Into Breakthrough Marketing Guide, available on Amazon and audiobook platforms. Cut through the guesswork and start building strategies that deliver real results. Ready to take it further? Join our expert-led training and breakthrough tools you can use right away. Don't miss out. Tune into our podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple TV for exclusive insights and inspiration. Stay ahead of the game. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. With the confidence and knowledge to bring your ideas to life, get ready to jump into it.